Then they say the aim of doing a presentation is said to be to entertain the listener without discomfort. Well, I hope I'm going to be able to keep you interested in my topic this evening, because a historical topic can sometimes bore people. So this is the outline of my lecture this evening. So, if we look at nursing, nursing is one of the most rapidly evolving professions in the health sciences. Over the past 48 years, the practice has evolved at many levels in terms of nursing education, technology, and research. Changes in healthcare have shifted the entire practice of nursing. In this lecture, we will be looking at an autobiographical account of nursing transformation over the past 48 years, that is from 1970 to 2018, with regard to nursing education and practice, research, and technology. The content of this lecture is mainly derived from our own experience and research conducted by various other authors. When I think of all the changes that has occurred in nursing, then the word transformation comes to mind. So, what drives healthcare transformation? There are various factors that drive healthcare transformation. Factors such as finance, disparity, the burden of disease, access problems, and many other problems. So therefore, the nursing profession is also not immune to the transformation agenda of the environment in which nursing occurs. In order to have a healthcare, professional healthcare workers, you have to keep up with your training in order to keep them updated so that they can address all those issues, the current issues that affects healthcare. So therefore, nursing education and everything else has to keep up with those changes and has to transform as well. So the concept of transformation in the nursing context could be understood to be a process of profound and radical change that turns the profession in a new direction and takes it to an entirely different level of effectiveness. Transformation implies a basic change of character and little or no resemblance with the past configuration or structure. Now, this is the interesting part. The nursing context in the 1970s. I started my nursing career in June 1970 at Livingston Hospital Nursing School. I studied under a block system. The block system, we would block for 2 months, and the rest of the time we will spend in the clinical areas. When you were on block, you were also expected to go to the wards early in the morning, 6:45, to assist with the full washes of those patients that couldn't wash themselves and help the staff to make the beds before you returned on block. So it wasn't easy. And the block system, we were given no scope for the exams, because we wrote SANC exams, and our lecturers only saw that exam paper on the morning of when you wrote, and they opened that exam paper in front of you. So really, we were very kept in the dark as to what was going to come into the paper. And also with the block system, we were very disciplined. And if you're not there on time, you would get into trouble. And our curriculum was mainly curative-based and not preventive and promotive. And we wrote, the first block was called the PTS block, and if you failed that block, you were excluded from nursing, and there were no appeals. You were excluded. The clinical areas were clean with no odors except for the smell of antiseptic. We truly adhered to the Florence Nightingale hygiene theory. We used to do damp dusting, high dusting, low dusting every day. We even went as far as using Vim to clean the cords of the extension cords if they were dirty, and the white rubbers of the beds. unlike today, when you walk into the wards, the degree of cleanliness and the odors sometimes you cannot tolerate it. So they were strict, but at least the wards were extremely clean. We lived in the nurses' home at the hospitals where we received our training and were not allowed to live at home for at least the first 3 years. The control over the visitors was very strict. Visitors weren't allowed beyond a certain point. You couldn't accept any visitors in your rooms. Our curfew was 9 o'clock. And we used to get one late night a month, and that was 11 o'clock. You were allowed to sleep at home for 2 nights a week when the days you were off. So we had very strict discipline on and off duty, but that molded us. That molded our characters, and I wouldn't want it any way, different. Then, during my training years, emphasis was placed on etiquette, professionalism, whereas today, nurse training is more focused on the academic side. When seniors walked into the ward, your doctors and your senior nursing staff, you had to give way for them. You had to stand aside, and if you were sitting in the duty room busy with the report or something, and they were senior and they walked in, you had to stand up. And if you accompanied them into the ward, you had to roll down your crisply starched white uniform, your sleeves as a sign of respect. So with all of that, I think, we were extremely disciplined as nurses, and it taught us to be responsible. And we wore clean white cap every day, stockings, highly polished lace, brown leather shoes, which could be easily cleaned when any body fluids, medicines, or chemicals spilled on the shoes. And that was sensible, because today you find students wearing tackies and shoes that have a material type of finishes, and if anything spills on there, I don't know how do they clean it, but it could also be a source for infection today. So here's just some pictures out of the archives. Those 3 students standing on the steps, we were in the same group when we started. They were first-year students, and the senior sisters actually used to wear those veils in our days. And we had a category immediately upon completion of your training. They were called staff nurses. So the one with a little bow on the side, starched cap with staff nurse. Today we're going, with a new curriculum, we're going back to the staff nurse category, calling them staff nurses. And then, because we stayed in the nurses' home, and it was so easily to form study groups, because we all had the same vision, we all had a common goal. So we were all nursing students, so you could sort of form a study group, and that was one of the study groups that I belonged to. And the lady in the front, anybody who knows actors, she got married to Ben Nomoy. So and then that is a picture of myself at Somerset Hospital as a student midwife. The white uniform and cap instilled a sense of pride in the work and sense of peace amongst patients. These clothes made a lasting positive impact on our society. These days, the only time you will see a nurse in a white uniform, cap, and stockings is at fancy dress parties. Nursing uniforms and dress codes have changed considerably since the time I worked in practice. Since the 1980s and 1990s, nursing uniforms have transformed, and scrubs seem to be on the incline in hospitals and clinics. And here's just some pictures of the type of uniforms nurses wear today, which is very different to the ones we used to wear when we were students. The scrubs appear to be popular among some nurses because they are comfortable, come in many patterns and colors, they are crease resistant, and new fabrics make them easy to clean. Although many praise the modern uniforms, some lament the fall of the standardized white nursing uniform because they are of the opinion that it exuded the dignity and professionalism that all nurses possess. And this is where our Minister of Health is stuck, that he still wants us to wear the white uniforms. It is now harder to tell the difference between registered nurses, nursing auxiliaries, technicians, and other personnel. We were placed in charge of 65 bedded wards for 2 to 3 months on night duty with an enrolled nurse and 2 junior nurses, enabling us to develop critical thinking and good judgment skills. This prepared us to take charge of a ward on completion of our training. Only the registered nurse would only call a doctor or a sister when the need arose. You, as a student, you were held accountable for your own acts and omissions, and if you did do anything on night duty, you were on the red carpet in the matron's office. The senior nurse on night duty was not allowed to leave the ward upon completion of a shift in the morning until she gave the day staff a comprehensive report of each patient with regard to what transpired during the night. And let it be a busy night, an intake night, you will often leave that ward at 9 a.m. in the morning, even though you're supposed to go off duty at 7. We would immediately take charge of a ward as a professional nurse upon completion of our studies. Today we're a student, tomorrow we just fit in as a professional nurse, and we didn't feel threatened at all. My basic training truly prepared me for practice and contributed to me becoming a compassionate, caring, dedicated, and competent professional nurse practitioner. Many aspects of nursing have transformed over the past 48 years, providing nurses with much more autonomy and mobility than before. The role of the nurse has expanded and the scope of practice varies internationally. This change in role has resulted as a shortage of health personnel and poor coverage of services being provided in order to ensure that care and services are still covered commendably. Nurses take on extra tasks to their own and also facilitate delegation of tasks to others, available staff, according to their category and training. Nurses are being trained to a higher level of care more than ever before. There is now more specialization in nursing, allowing students to follow paths in advanced primary health care, nephrology nursing, intensive care nursing, advanced psychiatric nursing, forensic nursing, and many more. Education and training. In South Africa, there are 3 categories of nurses, and I'm only dealing with the undergraduate programs. Professional registered nurses with 4 years of training or 2 years of bridging upon completion of the 2-year training for enrolled nurses. That gives you a professional category. Then we have the enrolled nurses with 2 years of training and nursing assistants or auxiliaries with 1 year of training. And this is currently the way they are in South Africa currently. The Nursing Act underpins all levels of nurse training and was revised several times over the 48 years. The main aspects of the Nursing Act with regard to education and training prior to 2005 included the control over nursing education and training, registration or enrollment, a prerequisite for practicing, keeping of registers and rolls, removal of names from register or roll and restoration thereof, custody and publication of registers and rolls, receipt as proof of registration, limited registration, registration of additional qualifications, registering of student nurses and midwives, enrollment of pupil nurses and pupil nursing auxiliaries, and refusal of registration or enrollment and the use of certain titles. So it's very comprehensive what's in the Nursing Act with regard to the education and training. I commenced my general nursing training under the Nursing Act number 69 of 1957, which was based along racial lines. As a person of color, we couldn't vote or we couldn't serve on the council. We also were not allowed to nurse patients, white patients. So certain amendments, and that caused a lot of stirrings and a lot of demonstrations. Certain amendments were made by the Nursing Amendment Act number 31 of 1970 and the Nursing Amendment Act number 14 of 1973. The most significant of those amendments were the inclusion of auxiliary nurses under the statutory control and finally the inclusion of nursing assistants, making nursing a closed profession. So you can see it wasn't very long ago when we were still not really strictly controlled all the categories. And that eliminated the Seragamps. Those people are not familiar with the term Seragamp. Seragamp was the name of a nurse that was in Charles Dickens' Martin Chuzzlewit's book. And it was a series where they depicted this incompetent, not well qualified nurse. And so as a result is, we often as students used to tease each other. If we saw each other doing something wrong and not adhering to what had to be done, we used to call them a Seragamp. And Seragamp was also given to the name of all these people, those people who know in the past used to have these aunties that used to, if there's anything wrong with your baby or you go into labor, go call Auntie oh so-and-so down the street. Now those were the Seragamps. And it was only after in these acts, these amendments to the act, that it became a closed profession and those people weren't allowed to practice any longer. So, in 1978, the Nursing Act number 50 of 1978 was passed, which was a red letter day for the members of council, which enabled non-white nurses to serve as full members of council and the right to elect members to the council. That was only in 1978. The aforementioned Nursing Act was amended several times, and I'm just going to put a slide just to show you that it has transformed, and it was amended about 7 times whilst we were using that act. The Nursing Act number 50 of 1978 was replaced by the Nursing Act number 33 of 2005, and the main aspects of this act were to bring nursing education and training in line with the National Qualifications Framework and related legislation. Now, you've seen all the things that that is stipulated with regards to nursing education and training under the Act. But what was new to this Act was Section 39 of the Act, which stipulates the conditions relating to continuous professional development, which wasn't part of the old Act. And also Section 40 of the Act stipulates who must do community service, and that the minister may, after consultation with the council, make regulations concerning the place at which such service is to be performed and the conditions of employment pertaining to persons who perform such a service. The regulations, on the other hand, we have various nursing regulations which stipulate conditions for the approval of nursing schools, admission criteria. I'd like to say at this stage, the admission criteria for the Act that I trained under was Standard 8. And I started nursing with Standard 8. And registration, restoration, termination, and completion of the course, duration of the course, the curriculum, exemptions, examinations, examination marks, and reassessment, admission to the examinations, promotions, readmission to the exams, dates of the examinations, applications for admission and readmission, and examination fees, examination centers, registration and application of regulations. You must bear in mind the council was the only body that controlled nursing. So they controlled all of those things. And then just to show you the various regulations and the amount of times the regulations was changed, and just to highlight, I trained under the regulation 3792 of the 28th of November 1969, as it was amended in 71, 72, and that's the period that I was still doing my general nursing. And then the midwifery regulation was R84 of the 16th of January 1970. That was for the diploma in midwifery. And just to show you regulation 254 of the 14th of February 1975, you see all the times it's been amended. And it's still in place, and it's still going to be in place for the new diploma in midwifery with a new qualification. And these are the regulations for the basic qualifications still, and this was the psychiatry, and then the certificate as enrollment. And you will see most of the regulations changed every 5 to 6 years, with the exception of these subcategories. There was, between the last one, 1979 and 1993, a 14-year gap. And then also the other regulations for the nursing assistant from the 1972, 21 years before they had a completely new regulation. But otherwise, there were amendments. Then in 1989, we had the minimum requirements for a bridging course for enrolled nurses, and these were to increase the number of professional nurses, so the nurses with a 2-year training program could then do the bridging course, which is still in practice today, or I don't know if it's been stopped. Then, in 1961, Charlotte Searle said, it was of the utmost importance to have as many nurses as possible. Those were all single qualifications that I've just showed you now. It was a single qualification in general nursing, and those were the only qualifications that were regarded as basic. Psychiatry, general nursing, midwifery. Those were the only 3. It was of the utmost importance to have as many nurses as possible who are able to function in a multi-skilled capacity in a large and sparsely populated country like ours. Multi-skilled nurses are able to give better, safer, and quicker service to the patient who needs such care than the singly qualified nurse. At the same time, multi-skilled preparation safeguards nurses against practicing outside their scope of practice. Because when you find yourself sometimes in an emergency situation, you can easily do things that you are not supposed to do, that's within your scope of practice. The Council further gave attention to developing a more comprehensive integrated program for more than 25 years before the integrated course for general psychiatry, community nursing, and midwifery was introduced. And that is the current program that we are implementing. In 1986, all nursing colleges were required to become affiliated with a university-based nursing department, which placed them officially within the higher education system. And these were the regulations for the integrated courses, first the midwifery and psychiatry. And then this is the regulation R425 of May 1985, which is the really comprehensive integrated program, which we currently are still busy implementing. The Council was the only authority legally and authorized to conduct nursing examinations for courses admitting nurses and midwives to the registers for students who were registered at the nursing colleges. That is all those single diplomas, but with the exception of the R425, because they were now affiliated to a university. So Council didn't sort of set their examinations. The examination system was controlled by the personnel of the South African Nursing Council head office. Preliminary examinations and final examinations for general nurses, midwives, mental nurses, and nurses for mental defectives were set by the Council. The Council still remains the only authority legally authorized to conduct nursing examinations for the certificate courses, like the enrolled nurse and the auxiliary nurse. The Council established a panel of examiners that were drawn from the nursing colleges. There has been a renewed focus on nursing education as part of the post-apartheid transformation of both the health and higher education sectors. The nursing education policy reforms have included the rationalization of nurse training institutions, changing the scope of practice of the nurses, and revising the nursing qualifications. The first phase of the reform process occurred between 2001 and 2009 and was primarily concerned with aligning existing nursing qualifications with the NQF. These were the legacy qualifications inherited in 1994 for the 4-year degree or diploma for professional nurse, the 2-year certificate for enrolled nurse, 1-year certificate for enrolled auxiliary nurse, and the 2-year bridging course for enrolled nurses leading to registration as a general nurse. SAQA defined specific processes for this process that involved the establishment of a nursing standards generating body. The nursing SGB drafted various qualifications between 2002 and 2004, and the process stalled because of lack of resources. The nursing SGB came into conflict with the South African Nursing Council, which had previously been the only body responsible for the regulation and development of nursing qualifications and was therefore disbanded. A further difficulty was the change from NQF to HEQF, which meant that the work done so far had to be revised. SANC took over the finalizing the registration of the legacy qualifications with SAQA, eventually completing the task in 2009. Nurse educators dominated the second phase. That was the first phase with the SGBs. The nurse educators dominated the second phase of reform from 2008 to 2013, which dealt with the development of a completely new nursing qualifications framework, also aligned with the HEQF, which was meant to be led by the South African Nursing Council. The new qualifications framework included two fundamental changes. The first, registration as a professional nurse will now require completion of a 4-year bachelor's degree at the university. As I mentioned earlier, there were 3 ways you could become a registered nurse. Now there's only one, and it's the only pathway and no longer 3. Second, the enrolled nurse has been replaced by a staff nurse with a 3-year college diploma at an HEQF level of 6, because a 2-year diploma is not permissible in the revised HEQF. The new qualifications are as follow. These are the new degrees that we are hoping to implement soon. The 4-year bachelor degree for professional nurse, the 3-year diploma for staff nurse, the 1-year diploma for midwifery, and the 1-year higher certificate for auxiliary nurse. According to the SANC circular number 3 of 2010, the implementation date for these new qualifications was supposed to be June 2015. And the NEIs were given time to have their last intake of legacy program students. Timeframes were not adhered to, and despite an initial deadline of 30th of June 2010 being set for the phasing out of the legacy qualifications, the process has continually been extended. And I mean, we in the nursing profession know there's so many problems with the starting date, but the new deadline is now 2019. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done with the new qualifications in order to have them implemented. The opportunities for the new qualifications could include making curricula more congruent with knowledge, expertise, and skills needs of a changing society and economy, achieving the requirement for nurses to be highly trained and well-educated critical thinkers, enabling nurses to make complex decisions, clinical decisions. The following concerns need to be addressed: the scope of practice. I think there is a draft scope of practice. The pace of the accreditation process of NEIs and programs, and uncertainty about the new qualifications versus the legacy qualifications. So, there's still a lot of work to be done in nursing education and practice. Now, research. When I did my basic training, midwifery, general nursing, I did a diploma in community nursing, I did a diploma in nursing admin, and the Beaker IHA, up until 1988 when I completed my Beaker IHA. Not in any of those programs did we ever even do a research module or any research projects. So, even though the need for research was identified in 1954 already by the South African Nursing Association, the South African Nursing Association came to an agreement with the University of Pretoria in 1955 to introduce master's and doctoral nursing degrees so that research relevant in nursing could be conducted, because they already had an undergraduate degree for nurses. Everser in 1988, in her doctoral thesis, stated that one of the most serious drawbacks which the profession of nursing faces in South Africa is the lack of trained personnel who are unable to undertake research. It was only when I did my Beaker Honours degree in the early 90s did I complete a research methodology module and a treatise that was externally examined. Today that has changed. The students do an essay and it's internally examined. The importance of research in nursing is particularly evident in the changes to nurse education made in recent years. And then Van Rooyen, Rix and Morton found in 2012 that an increasing number of nurses are involved in research activities, such as research supervision, mentoring junior researchers, examining and reviewing research, utilizing research findings in practice, and conducting sophisticated quantitative and qualitative studies. For the first time in this new Act of 2005, mention is made of research in nursing in Section 41 of the Act, which stipulates that the Council may take appropriate disciplinary action against persons who act in contravention of the prescribed ethical conduct pertaining to research in nursing practice. In 2012, Van Rooyen, Rix and Morton conducted research on the status of research-related activities of South Africa's university nursing schools. The study provided an overview of the status of nursing research in South Africa and determined the overall research outputs for the various South African nursing schools. The research findings revealed that only 23.54% of the nursing academics in South Africa had doctoral degrees, and this limited the availability of research supervisors. Almost half of the academics employed at nursing schools are employed in full-time contract positions. In South Africa, each year at that time, 4.7 articles per nursing school per year are published in accredited journals. It was evident from the results that there was an increase in the output of publications and funding for research, but that the output rate of postgraduate students had shown nominal improvement, especially regarding the doctorates. The problems that were quoted by the participants were that affect research outputs included writing challenges, a lack of stability or constant change in management in many nursing schools, a shortage of experienced supervisors, and unrealistic workloads. Support programs at various nursing schools have been established to support researchers. The Forum for University Nursing Deans in South Africa, Fundisa, has been actively promoting nursing research since its inception, and in 2012, Fundisa introduced the Plume Project, which is a structured support program for nurse researchers. The program is designed to support nursing schools to develop research programs. Now, at that time, research programs was a new concept to nursing schools, because each one just did his own research in his own little corner, and there wasn't like a program for the departments. So the project, in partnership with the National Research Foundation, aims to develop lead researchers who will not only create research-intensive programs in their schools, but also enhance their skills working towards NRF scientific rating. Overall success of this project has been evidenced through the following achievements: fortified research capacity of nursing faculty, improved quality of postgraduate supervision, enabling platforms for research development and training of postgraduate students, increased outputs in terms of research publications, and expansion of research collaborations and networks, more nurse researchers working to attain NRF rating. And I think here in our department we have 3 NRF fellows, and so they've now, I think there were 2 of us that was the pioneer for this program, and they've now looked at it and it's really evolved and it's really developed. So they're a bit more selective in their selection these days. So, a National Nursing Research Advisory Committee was elected to draft the National Research Strategy for South Africa for the relevant stakeholders. And this strategy was developed by our own Professor Van Rooyen in our faculty. So the aim of this research strategy was to enhance collaborative, rigorous scientific inquiry that builds a significant body of knowledge in order to improve the health of the people of South Africa. The objective of this strategy will be achieved by building a research culture in nursing, because as you can see, nursing sort of, developed research very late. And building research programs across the country. It is envisaged that the research strategy will contribute significantly to directing future nursing research development in South Africa. So looking at all the developers in research, where we started off, where we are now, there has been a lot of growth with regard to nursing research. So if we look at technology, 48 years ago when I started my nursing career, very limited technology was used in nursing. Syringes and needles were reusable. All dressings and procedure packs were packed and sterilized in the autoclave in the central sterilizing department. Intravenous bags did not exist, but IV glass bottles did. Gloves were reusable. We used to wash those gloves, dry them, powder them, and reuse them. And disposable syringes and needles and plastic IV bags were later introduced. Modern medicine today is a throwaway culture, which could also contribute to the pollution. These were the glass syringes that we used to sterilize. I remember working in central sterilizing department and taking those needles and sharpening them on whetstones in order to reuse them. But it was made of a good quality stainless steel that you could reuse. Today's stainless steel is not the same. And those were the vaccoliters we used, the glass bottles. Today we use the disposable syringes and the plastic bags. Then when I was a student, we used the blackboard. And that was the only way we were taught, was with the blackboard. And it was only when I did my diploma in nursing admin and I started at UP did I get taught with an overhead projector. And at that time, the overhead projector, we used transparencies with different color pens, and if the lecturer's handwriting wasn't neat enough, they would use a stencil to help them. So that was the means that we were taught. But today, we have a lot of technology, like computers, smart boards, interactive boards, document cameras, and overhead projectors, and these are just a few. There are so many forms of technology that are used today. Our skills were mostly demonstrated to us on live patients in the ward, as simulation mannequins were not so advanced as they are today. There were a few skills such as bed baths, back and pressure areas, mouth care, dressings, and female catheterizations that were demonstrated to us in the clinical instruction room. We didn't have a clinical lab. Simulation technology is rapidly expanding today, and nursing programs are making large investments in this technology. Simulation has a great potential for undergraduate nursing programs, but unfortunately, sometimes this potential is underestimated and underused. With simulation technology, undergraduate students can gain and improve skills in a safe, non-threatening, experiential environment that also provides opportunities for decision-making, critical thinking, and team building. We had one mannequin, and I do see some people here that trained with me at Livingston, Mrs. Chetty, and there are others that we had Mrs. Jones. And Mrs. Jones, you couldn't do much with Mrs. Jones. Today, we are proud at the university to say we own one of these diagnostic mannequins. They call him Harvey. And with Harvey, you are able to make very appropriate diagnosis for your conditions. So this is a diagnostic mannequin, and the prices are very expensive, but it is a good mannequin to use to teach people diagnostic skills. And then we have the SIM, several high-fidelity patient simulators. Adult, we have the adult, maternal, child, and newborn, are all used in conjunction with a computer program to simulate the symptoms and reactions of an actual patient. The SIM-man is designed to aid in the teaching of skills pertaining to airway, breathing, cardiac, and circulation management. With these mannequins, you can make the learning so realistic. And this is a therapeutic mannequin, because here you can give too much or, play around with their vital signs to see reactions to various things. But the previous one I showed you is more diagnostic mannequin. So in today's healthcare, system technology is the foundation of the future. Changes in technology are a major driver of changes in the nursing profession. There are huge shifts in how patient records are maintained today, how medications are tracked and ordered, how care is passed from one provider to another, how blood and X-ray results are retrieved, and how information is being accessed at the point of care. Some older nurses are uncomfortable with new technology for various reasons, and this tendency is slowing down the adoption of these new methods in certain circumstances. Modern nursing care has been called a mixture of high-tech and high-touch, a way to describe the traditional nurturing and compassion of a nurse in combination with the advanced healthcare technology of the 21st century. Many of the applications nurses use are wireless. Today's nurses must not only know how to care for patients, but how to use technology safely and appropriately in their day-to-day work. Medical advancements and information technologies of the 20th century have not only changed the face of nursing, they have become part of the intricate fabric of the field of nursing. Now, what are the technologies responsible for this monumental transformation? Firstly, we have what we call the electronic IV monitors. And those who nursed in those days, you know how you had to set the IV monitor and count the drops and actually manage it from the time you put up that drip to make sure that it completes within that time. And any movement of the patient could interfere with that flow of that drip. So today, with the advent of the IV pump and infusion and electronic monitoring, nurses are freed up and to initiate an IV and allow the machine to monitor and regulate the process. So if there is an error, the system tries to correct it and otherwise contacts the nurse via remote monitoring. So gone are the days where you used to stand there next to the bedside, and if the doctor said that vacuoliter had to be finished within 6 hours, you had to make sure that it's within 6 hours. The sphygmomanometer. This is just a big word for an ordinary blood pressure machine that monitors your blood pressure and your pulse. Now, if we look at this, I was used to the desk ones, the ones that you put on the patient's locker, and if you've used that and you were down for blood pressures that day, or in the hypertensive clinic, where you have to take hundreds of blood pressures, you know what it did to your ears, eh? It used to make your ears so sore, that stethoscope. But today, this technology changes the biggest daily difference, and you don't have to sometimes use a stethoscope to take the patient's blood pressure. Then if we look at the information management system, so as computer technologies become the primary means of managing patient information, nurses have had to adapt to the record-keeping systems and practices and increase their computer skills. So nursing informatics is a specialty that has emerged, combining IT skills and nursing science. So we are looking at, in the new curriculum, to have a subject on nursing informatics. Then we look at the portable defibrillator. You can only do so much with the manual CPR. But today, with the portable defibrillator, school nurses can also even use it and do successful CPR, because the few minutes after heart failure are critical, and the portable defibrillator allows for immediate resuscitation. So these things you can carry around with you, and we never had it. I remember code red. We had to first run for the resuscitation board, get it on underneath the patient because they had to have a hard surface. Then we look at the sonograms and ultrasound. Ultrasound devices provides nurses working with pregnant patients the ability to see inside the womb. Ultrasound has been nothing short of revolutionary in the field of women's health and pregnancy, allowing nurses and doctors to non-invasively identify the health of the baby throughout pregnancy. Now, with the advent of 4D ultrasound, unprecedented detail is available for diagnosing fetal well-being. In addition to pregnancy monitoring, sonogram technology also offers many other new diagnostic advances, such as the ability to identify cancer tumors in the bladder and to tell whether the liver is enlarged. Then if we look at the wireless, local wireless telephone networks, these systems significantly reduced communication delays. Not only is this type of communication technology being utilized between nursing staff, but also between nursing staff and their patients, and the changing dynamics of the relationship between patients and their nurses through the wireless connections. Then we look at the drug management systems. The health tech systems of medication retrieval and delivery, such as barcoding and verification, have greatly reduced the potential for dangerous error infusion equipment. Advances have made the delivery of slow administered drugs much easier with computerized machines able to control dosages and rates. Then we look at the learning technology. The learning technology has made it possible for nurses to do distance learning and to have software packages that facilitates the learning process. Then we also have video conferencing, which is very important because this puts you in contact with people internationally and you can have various discussions, and it also changes the way you manage your nursing care. And then lastly, the smartphones. The mobile technology facilitates access to information at the point of care where you don't need to no longer look at books and things. You can access information via your smartphone. So these are just a few. There are many more types of technology that has really changed nursing. Then in 2008, we were approached by AD Satellite, which is a Boston-based NGO, to become a collaborative partner in an intervention project that involved various stakeholders. And the aim of this project was to develop a mobile library as an app on a smartphone that could enable nurses to access information at the point of care for clinical decision-making. I became the principal investigator for this project, which comprised 3 phases. Phase 1 comprised the health information needs assessment in order to assess what type of information do registered nurses feel they need to be able to access at the point of care in order to make clinical decisions. Phase 2 comprised developing the mobile library app based on the research findings of phase 1. And then the implementation phase, this smartphone was uploaded with the mobile library that was developed, and it was distributed amongst a pilot study of about 50 registered nurses employed at the PE hospital complex. Phase 3 comprised determining whether access to information at the point of care did in fact enhance nursing practice through formal evaluation study. So if you look at the findings of phase 1, that it reflected the registered nurses' current access to information. It also reflected the main sources of information accessed, and it also reflected the ways in which current accessed information was used in practice, and also the information needed at the point of care. And if you look at the common topics that were identified that they needed at the point of care, this is in line with our burden of disease in South Africa. These are the diseases that are prevalent in the communities, and you can see how they wanted more information on this. The findings of phase 3 of the study was conducted by an honors student, and that study highlighted clinical nursing practice was enhanced by providing relevant, up-to-date and correct information to their patients, and also that they use the information to empower patients with knowledge of their own illness, and also they used the information for their own knowledge was enhanced, and they were able to recognize the side effects of drugs, and it enabled them to recognize various conditions and update their knowledge on the management and treatment of various illnesses. And if you look at this group, if you look at nursing has an aging population. So most of the people who participated in this study were people in their 40s and were never exposed to computers at school or any time. So this was like really something for them that excited them, and it was really new. Then, in the same student who did the honors program, she did then for a master's a qualitative study to look at the experience. How did they experience using that mobile device to access information? And these were some of the findings that were highlighted. Like I've already said, they were quite an aging population, so what they said, it opened a whole new world to them because it allowed them to develop computer skills, because they were taught how to conduct web searches for information, send and receive electronic mails, use the keypad to type, to download information from the web, and to perform calculations. They also stressed that support groups were important for the registered nurses for diagnosing some of the technical problems that they experienced while using the device. The registered nurses indicated nursing is a dynamic profession which requires up-to-date and constant changes and the need to update themselves constantly, but they did not always have the opportunity to attend formal courses. So they indicated that the smartphone provided them with an opportunity to update themselves with knowledge without having to leave their workplaces, thus enabling them to update themselves. A further study was conducted in 2013 titled Developing a Mobile Health Information System for Accessing Information at the Point of Care for Medical Doctors and Professional Nurses who were in the rural areas. This study was conducted in the rural areas amongst 123 participants, and both the medical and practitioners and professional nurses found the information provided on the smartphone or tablet to be very useful and easy to access. They indicated that having access to information at the point of care assisted them in many ways to make correct clinical decisions, which impacted on the care that they provided to their patients. In 2015, I was awarded an NRF grant to conduct a similar project for student nurses. I've conducted all the baseline studies for the information needs required by students for clinical decision making and found that there is a need to develop such an app for students. The development of the app is in progress. And if you want to read further on the research projects, these are some of the titles of the projects, and there was one published, the first one in Curationes. There was an honors treatise, master's dissertation, also a publication, podium presentations, and various master studies pertaining to this topic. So, in conclusion, it is evident that nursing has transformed in many ways since 1970 with regard to nursing education, research, technology, and that nurses have always been the drivers of nursing transformation. We are smart and can solve the most ponderous problems with our creativity and initiative. There appears to be a lot of outside interference currently and dissatisfaction among nurses today with regard to the progress made with the new nursing curriculum and research in nursing. So I'm appealing to my young colleagues present here today, not to allow non-nurses to decide the future for nurses, but to stand together and not to shy away from leadership positions. Because I have noticed over the past few years, the strong nurse leaders are moving into non-nursing leadership roles, leaving a gap in nursing with regard to leadership. In closing, I would like to state that we need a clear vision of how we would like to transform nursing in the next 10 to 15 years. Having a vision creates unity. Failing to have a vision, you become whatever the times dictate. You fragment your educational system, you turn over your autonomy to outsiders, and you fight with each other. I didn't say that. It is time for us to develop a vision for nursing in the 21st century in order to take it to new levels, because as nurses, I believe we can. Transformation is an ongoing process that tends to appear ordinary when in fact something extraordinary is taking place. So thank you for being here this evening and listening to my presentation.